Hello, everyone. Welcome to March 25th CNAB Registry and Security meeting. This is usually just me and Trushank chatting about stuff that we need to do in the next couple of weeks. Today, apparently, we have an audience again, so thanks a lot for joining. First item on the agenda that Trushank is editing in real time is a pull request to the cnab-spec.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was busy taking notes at the same time. Yes, it'll be great. So we have, after discussing with Radu and a few others, I have extended, so if you click on that link, 356, I've basically extended cnab-spec to include in-toto, which means now you get provenance of your bundles. And I talk about how to do it using Notary v1. It's kind of inflexible, as we talked about. You can't really do richer delegation schemes, but like I said, this should accommodate most use cases out there. Yeah, so someone could take a look, read it from a fresh point of view and say, hey, Trushank, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. That would be great.
For people who don't have a lot of context for this particular pull request, we've had a recurring issue over the past couple of months where the delegations we could do in Notary v1 in the client essentially did not give us enough flexibility as to how to choose this the signing key for the root layout. So after chatting with Justin Cormack for a while, we reached the conclusion that having a fixed delegation model for the in-toto root layout would be an acceptable solution for Notary v1. And if you're familiar with the Docker CLI and the way it does delegations for the targets, it's very similar, essentially.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's a convention-based delegation model between the targets that signs the bundle and the signing key that does sign the in-toto root layout.
Yeah. The reason, just as a refresher, why are we doing this whole delegation scheme? Because if you look at the MVP, there's no delegations at all, right? There's the 4 classic tough roles. Forget about the first 3. The important thing is the target thing that signs for your bundles or images, right? So why are we not just using this when you add in-toto? Why do you need to make it complicated and have targets and targets releases? It's because when you use in-toto, you want to keep some things basically immutable, right? Never give machines to sign these things, which is basically the rules for your software supply chain, right? These rules cannot be changed. Otherwise, you really lose security. And then the targets releases role is the key you can safely give to your machines, because they will sign for your bundle, but they cannot misbehave according to the rules for your pipeline. So I hope that gives you guys some context to help review.
This specifically will have impact as to the workflows people will use when building, pushing, and creating root layouts for bundles. So just a heads up for that this will have impact.
And I'm guessing, so you referenced that Notary v1 has this problem, but I'm guessing v2 they're designing to not have this problem.
Specifically, the next item on the agenda is to create the issue for Notary v2. Specifically, just a background on that, we've chatted with people designing Notary v2 right now, and yes, they acknowledge that this is something that Notary v2 should handle. It's a scenario that they want handled.
Yeah. Sorry, one more PR before I forget is the Signy PR that tries to improve the default key management for Signy. So what we've basically done here, we're basically doing the MVP model where you're not yet using in-toto, you're just using tough, right? And you got this four keys for every bundle or image you're trying to sign, and that's not great. So one thing I've done is to push for every bundle, the timestamps 2 of these keys to Notary. So you don't need to worry about it. And you need to worry only about the other 2, but we're reusing them across repositories. So really, you're basically just managing 2 keys for every bundle, right? Which is great. And then there's really only one of those keys that you need to give to your machine if you have to, but that's it. It really should vastly simplify your life.
Just to reiterate what I posted in chat, that Signy does push in-toto metadata right now, but not using the key management model that we just described. We have to update that, and I think we should at least open the issues that describe in detail how it should be handled.
Yeah, just to add a note, I think Jacob will be looking at my PR real soon, so it'll help to review it and also test it in production.
Ooh, that's a great way to review a PR. Okay. Next is the V2 delegation model issue, which we briefly touched on earlier. Do you want to add something to that, Prashank? Is there anything that you want to add?
To the HackMD, yeah, we should. Let me read through this. I think both of us have added quite a lot here. So just remind me, because that meeting has been a while now. What did we agree to file to them from that meeting? Did we want to file this use case?
Yeah, specifically the key delegation model use case and that alone. I think
Okay.
the rest of the items on there we brought up in the meeting and we discussed them in some way with the Notary V2 community. The one item that we sort of brushed upon was Glenn's establishing trust between multiple registries.
Yeah.
And the surprisingly unanimous response there was that should probably not be a responsibility of people designing Notary and Registry. So yeah, that's what we brought back in our community as well. So I don't think there's anything on that specific issue we can add. And then the rest of them should be handled by Notary, other than the key management model issue, for which we will gonna open an issue.
Got it. So looking at the document now, it looks fairly good. What do you think we need to add before we send this off?
As we've seen in the meeting itself, other than a handful of people, most are not familiar with the delegations at all.
Gotcha.
So I think a little bit of background on why we need this in the first place. I
No
think
problem.
that's going to go a long way. Yeah,
Okay,
probably Justin and Santiago and other people will understand what we need, but probably not everyone has enough background to understand whether this is something useful or not.
No problem. This is what I used to do full time, writing boring academic papers. So I'll get around to it today. I see Matt got a good laugh out of it. So
People think that spec work is quick and easy. It's reading the same freaking thing 1,000 times. it's really painful.
Speaking of, we're preparing the security spec for final reviews and feedback. I think the last PR that we have open is the final important bit that we want merged, and then I think we're ready for people to have a final complete read of the spec and be like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Hopefully that's not going to happen. But yeah, I think we're at the stage where we want people to do that again. And if there are any discrepancies or there anything that doesn't make sense, now would be the time to change it. So if you do have some time, first of all, to review 356, which is the previous PR, and give a quick read to the entire spec, now would be a really, really great time. Moving on. The next issue is about opening issues for Signy to implement the delegation model. I don't think we have those issues yet, and I'll open them later today. And other than the delegation model, I don't think there's anything else right now to Signy that needs updating based on the current version of the spec. Right now it does Notary v1 according to the current state of the spec text. And the only thing that it doesn't do is, key delegations, because it doesn't do delegations at all. So the only significant thing to add is going to be delegations. And then the other big thing that we sort of brought up a bunch of times in the past that people haven't necessarily been that interested in is templates. So I brought up last week that if we want people to use InToTo, we should make it as easy as possible. As we've seen with TOF, even if you don't have a whole bunch of things to do, people still don't do it because it's conceptually difficult than not doing it. So I'm thinking about ways to make it as easy as possible for people to use it. And one of those is templates for InToTo metadata. This would include usual verification steps that you would do in a software process, like verify git commits and verify built binaries and things like that. It'll probably not be exhaustive by any means, but it should include some very, very common use cases for InToTo. And I think this is where the InToTo root layout builder, the website, could come in handy. We could at least point to it. But yeah, if you have ideas, thoughts, example projects that use simple verification for InToTo, this would be a great time to share those.
Do you think Santiago would be interested in because I know he's designed a lot of them.
Yeah, we actually brought this up with someone from NYU a couple of weeks ago. Tushank, have you had any more conversations with him about it?
Yeah, Aditya. Yeah, so yes, we talked about something called IT4. IT is the equivalent of the Python enhancement proposal for InToTo. It's the InToTo enhancement something. I forget what it is. But this enhancement was to support things like, so InToTo right now is basically married to files, right? That's the only thing it can support by default. But we want to generalize that. What happens if you have like a URL that points to something? Here's our particular use case. How exactly do you use InToTo to check a bundle JSON, for example? It's not entirely clear because it's not always that a human writes all of the bundle JSON. And it's not always that a machine writes all of the bundle JSON. It could be a mix of the two, right? So using this IT, basically, we can do things like, okay, this key under the bundle JSON better be signed by human developers. And then the other keys can be signed by machines, right? So that's the relevance of this IT, enhancing InToTo to be able to do this. That's one thing we discussed yesterday, and we're trying to, there was some concerns that it's kind of strange to put a URL because things can change all the time. And so you might run into accidental DOS attacks, right? You accidentally DOS yourself because someone changed something, say a machine. So we're working through issues like that. If you guys are interested, you know, I can send the meeting invite next time. But that student is working on it. As for InToTo root layouts for CNAB, we're still thinking about it. What makes sense? What's a good basic thing to do? I need to think about it too, to be honest, because it's not clear what would be a simple use case that would work for everybody. One thing Radu is saying the least you can do is check. So here's a very simple software supply chain for a bundle. A human being commits source code to a Git repository and then signs the state of the Git repo at that time. So that's step number one. And then step number two is somehow the machine takes this Git source code and then transform it to a bundle, right? So you have two signatures, two steps in the software supply chain. And you check that humans signed the first step, that is the source code. It's not trivial to check that the machine has built the right bundle out of that source code, right? Because it has access to all these other things. But that's one simple thing that we can do that should work for most people, right? And we need to brainstorm about what sort of provenance we would like to see from bundles by default.
One verification process could be rebuild the bundle itself and check that it yields the same digest, right?
Yes.
Once we have in place a very rudimentary layout, I think we're gonna start seeing things that start making sense more and more. But because we don't have yet not even dummy layouts, I think that's harder to conceptualize rather than this is it, start adding verifications to this.
Correct.
People to do this.
Yeah, that's true. So one thing I'm going to do is, after we knock out this delegations thing on Notary V2 repo today, is basically start working on implementing that PR, the 356 PR. While people are still sending feedback, I can be programming that. And then we should have something pretty soon, hopefully. Yeah. And then Radu's right. We can do interesting things like reproducible builds. It complicates build pipelines for some people, but that's one way you get, because you now need to have two machines rebuilding the same thing, but depends on how paranoid you are.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think we need to give a reasonable, simple enough layouts template for people to use. But yeah, after that, if we've enabled everything in the tooling and not restricted the spec for people to use, I think that should give enough room for people to just go with it. Hopefully people actually use the security signatures this time.
Oh yeah, they will. I'm not too worried because we're designing Signy to be quite simple to use. So
something being simple to use never stopped people from not using security features in the past. So
clearly I have a lot to learn.
Well, yeah, I think it's a prerequisite that it must be easy. It doesn't guarantee use, but I mean, things like PGP and things like that, it's, just because there are tools, if the barrier is even a little bit, that can be too much for some people. But yeah, we must push it as the right thing for people to do, and plenty of examples and things will help, I think. So
if it's easy, it's not guaranteed that people will use it. If it's hard, people will definitely not use it. So
yeah.
But what I think is good about our case is that we already have a number of people in the community who are like, we will use this because we have very strict security requirements already and we can't meet them with other tools. If we get those people, make it easy for them and get them to become like the secondary source of reference for us, right? That will help us build the security story. So really, that's the group of people that I think if we target with this, which means making Signy an easy tool to get started with, and as they ease their way into understanding how to write these things, I think we have an audience ready-made that will want to pick up some of that. Even if it's not everybody, we're going to have some people, and they'll hopefully help us snowball.
The main problem that I've seen with these people is while they exist, they're not very vocal in the community. And now would be a perfect time for us for them to contribute a very simplified version of whatever they're trying to achieve, right? Because right now we're making the assumption that, well, you're going to do Git signatures, but maybe that's not one of the things that they're doing. So yeah, while we're designing for this to accommodate most and hopefully all their scenarios, I don't think we understand all of their scenarios yet. So
I'm making a note of that in the minutes, just so people read it later and go like, aha, okay.
Yeah, and should we proactively reach out to some people? I know in many of these cases we can't even talk about these people in the meeting, but we can reach out to them privately and get some of them to weigh in. And
yeah, I'll also ask Ralph about this. He knows the people mostly.
Cool.
Okay, and finally, the registry spec update. Chris started a document a few weeks ago, and Sylvan and I have been slowly adding things, and essentially sections about, well, how to represent a bundle in an OCI registry, how to do relocation and things like that. I just pasted the working document. It's not ready for a for a full review. I think we still need maybe a week or two before people can give it a read and the document making sense. But yeah, Chris, do you want to add anything about the document?
No, just a big thank you to you and Signy, who's not here, but you guys have done a lot of good work. Every time I open the doc, more stuff is in there, so that makes me feel really good. Yeah, I started working on the invocation images stuff. One thing that I wanted to discuss with you and with Sylvain was I started writing it just from the OCI perspective, and then reality hit me in the head. And it's actually pretty difficult to build like an OCI compliant image right now, unless you're using something a bit exotic. So I think we may need to basically have the Docker manifest v2 support in the spec, just because the practical reality is that's what the world looks like right now. So what I've been trying to do is saying should with a may, so should use OCI, but may use Docker manifest or Docker manifest list, for example, in a couple of places. Another area that we need to discuss, because I know that you and Sylvain have done more work on this than me, is the annotations. Because we have a bunch of annotations in various different places. I was going to just copy them from the code. I know that the media type, I think we've changed a couple of times. So I just want to make sure we also get the media types right and things. But yeah, I think it's going in the right direction. There are some corner cases that I thought of, but I think we should tackle them separately. Things like you could have an invocation image, which is multi-arch, and you could imagine having a VM as well. So you could have these a manifest, or you could have an OCI index that points to an OCI index or something like that that points to another one. So we should be careful we don't embed things too deep. We can take it offline as well, but yeah, there's a couple of corner cases I think we may, or I don't think we should tackle them. I think we may need to tackle them later. But if you have also more examples from Microsoft specifically, where there's people using cnabs in weird and wonderful ways, maybe it'll be good to get them to give their read of the spec when it's more.
One question that I started writing a section and I was like, I should probably not write this before discussing is, right now our implementation, Synaptoci, assumes that your registry allows arbitrary media types, so OCI artifacts, and multiple images in the same repo. So, and also assumes that the user who does the push operation wants those to be in the same repo. One use case that I've seen pop up in the past was, well, I only want to push the bundle file itself and not any images. And I started writing that the simplest representation of a bundle in an OCI registry would be an OCI index that only points to the bundle config and does not relocate images or anything else. Is that something from your perspective, something that's reasonable? And I think our implementation doesn't do it yet, but is it something that we want to allow our other implementations to do? And specifically thinking about how other registries will probably actively block some of, at least a subset of the things that we need.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think having a common format where the invocation image and the other images as optional is probably preferable to having like two different ways of pushing cnabs to a registry. So I think that's the right thing. I think some of the wording around the invocation images I may have put it must have an invocation image, so we may need to say it may reference one. So there's some wording that needs to change. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We might need to litmus test it on the community meeting just to make sure that we're not missing something obvious. There's also a bunch of fun cases that we found when pushing to different registries. Things like if you create a manifest, so basically you push the bundle JSON as a blob and then you reference it from a manifest. If that manifest doesn't have layers, some registries freak out. So you can, I think that's a case where we should just tell the registries to not care. But there's other cases that are, once again, this is where it starts to get really fun. I think it might be GCR, but if you push you can't mix and match Docker manifests with OCI manifests, which I can understand why you wouldn't want to do that. But there could be cases, for example, where you're referencing, let's say, the Nginx image, which is built as a Docker manifest, or is represented as a Docker manifest. But your CNAB is an OCI index, and that'll break it because they're two different formats. So yeah, while we live in this world where there's essentially two different formats for images, it's really difficult to navigate what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think for the foreseeable future, we're gonna need the fallback mechanism that Synaptoci does, right? And we're gonna have to be a little more flexible into what media types we allow for images and for invocation images in the index.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. We may be able to be slightly more prescriptive in saying that, you know, even then we don't have control over everything. Because it's not certain that we built the other images, so we can't know if they're all going to be mixed and matched formats. Yeah, I was going to say we could do something more intelligent, but we really can't. We just kind of have to. Some CNABs will have trouble being pushed to certain registries, and that's it.
Yeah, and just for the record, the distinction between only pushing the bundle config and also pushing images and invocation images would, in both cases, would be an OCI index. It's just that when only pushing the bundle config, you don't have other manifests in the manifest list, right? So it's the representation itself should be no different whatsoever, other than, oh, there's only a manifest, which is the bundle config and not images, which you can just get from their original location if you choose to.
Yeah, I'm +1 on that. So yeah, keeping the format the same.
And then and then the second option would be, I want to relocate my my images, but my registry does not allow multiple media types in the same repo. So I cannot have in the same repo a CNAB bundle, a Docker image, and an OCI index, right? There are registries that can actively block this. So one workaround for this would be implementations can update the original bundle and then push the images and invocation images in the same registry, but not in the same repo, and then push the bundle again in the same registry, but just a different repo. So you would have both the bundle and images in the same registry.
Yeah. And
when you pull the bundle from registry, it references images there. So it could. I'm trying to figure out how much of a recommendation or a footnote this should be, this section.
That part gets really complicated because we need a bunch of changes to the OCI spec. We need the notion of not just foreign layers, but foreign images.
No, I'm not even. I don't even want to get into that. I'm just talking about. You updated the bundle to point to images that are in this repo. We're not updating an OCI index with foreign layers. You would just, if your registry doesn't support it, we would only have an OCI index with one manifest, which is the bundle, and the bundle the bundle itself would point to images in this registry, not layers, not other manifests, because it just.
If we do that, then GC may kill us. So you will lose all guarantees on the underlying images being there. This is part of the reason we wanted to push everything and reference everything from the same index. Yeah, it's messy because the garbage collection will come along and say, well, this is just an image without a tag, so goodbye.
Well, we could always create a tag for the image.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you create every image referenced in the bundle as a standalone image with a tag, and then reference their digests, then I think GC should be fine.
It's not stable though, because if somebody comes along and cleans out that image manually, then you'll lose it. Again, because it's tagged, or they remove the tag. I almost lean towards saying either you push them fat and then you get the guarantees of GC, or you push them thin and there's no guarantees. I think that's the only sane thing we can propose, because it's either you push the bundle.json by itself with no other images, in which case it's best effort, or you push thick bundles in the same repo and then GC and everything just works.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I was trying to make sure whether we can give any more notes to a potential implementation that wants to use a registry that does not support that. But I think we can have an appendix somewhere where we discuss all this. But yeah, I think you're right, unfortunately.
What we can do though is we can say this is what we would like it to look like. So we have a reference to point people when they say, what would you, I know, how can I support CNAB? We say, support these things, and then it'll just work. Because that'll make it a lot easier than if we have all these, because the spec is going to have a bunch of these ifs, but we should try to keep the ifs down to a minimum, because otherwise it becomes really difficult to implement. And the other thing is, if we don't have a canonical reference, then all registries are just going to be like, too difficult, don't care, won't support properly.
Yeah, I think that's a sane approach. Yeah, let me think about the section that I don't think I added anything that falls into this category yet in the text. So
we could also ask for reviews from people who know registries well. When we were developing this internally, I mean, it was actually put forward by the people who worked in registries, so they had all this in their heads. But whenever we challenged things or whatever, they would come back giving garbage collection or something else, or something fun that we didn't think of. So getting registry eyes on this will be good.
To be clear for anyone watching this at a later date, we're not debating how Synaptoci, how our implementation should work. We're just debating how prescriptive or how many implementation notes should we give for implementations trying to use registries who do not support the minimum feature set that requires you to use CNAB in its full way right now. So
yeah, the intention here is that instead of designing something from scratch that would be perfect, we're trying to make it so you can share your CNABs with existing infrastructure, and that's why it's a bit of a challenge. We decided that would be a better way to tackle this, because getting multiple registries to move towards or to support something is more difficult than just being a little bit more lax on the spec side. And because end users will not really be exposed to most of this, we felt that it was a reasonable compromise. It's really only us poor tool developers who have to deal with this crazy world we live in. The Zoom of silent laughs. Everybody's well-trained and is muting when they're not speaking.
Somehow that is a perfect way to end this meeting. I don't have anything else to add on the agenda. Sorry,
on that pleasant note.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, everyone. This was super good.
This is great, yeah.
Thanks.
All right, cool.
Yeah, see you guys.
Bye, everyone.